Hey guys, welcome to the channel for the very first time. Today I'm going to be making my predictions for UFC on ESPN 9, Woodley versus Burns, and I'll also be releasing the tips that I've chosen up on Verdict. For those of you that don't know, Verdict's an app that lets you predict outcomes of fights and score fights whilst they're going on. They give you XP to wager on each fight, with more unusual outcomes being rewarded with higher kind of multipliers for your XP that you're wagering. So the first fight of the main card's Mackenzie Dern versus Cyphers. Mackenzie Dern's 1.2 times at the moment on Verdict, and Cyphers 6.12, so she's a considerable underdog here. Dern is 7-1, 2-1 in the UFC, and 4-1 in her last 5. Cyphers is 10-4, 2-2 in the UFC, and 3-2 in her last 5. Pretty much I'll be pretty quick with this. I think Dern's size advantage is going to be a big factor here. I know it's only 3 inches in height and a couple inches also in reach, but Cyphers has always struggled with bigger girls. From what I've seen, she doesn't really carry too much power in her hands, although she does have TKO wins. But then the ground game is just kind of a massive gap. And it also happens that Cyphers is kind of weak here. Macy Barber landed 23 unanswered ground strikes. Angela Hill landed 29 on Cyphers, and they both finished her through ground and pound. Dern did lose her last fight against Amanda Ribas, but that's a tough comeback fight for Mackenzie after her pregnancy. Amanda is much longer and much better striker than what Cyphers is. And I feel like, Cyphers probably was a better comeback fight for Dern than Ribas was anyhow. So I'm tipping Dern to get the finish. Cyphers lost 4 fights, and 3 of those have been by finish. And also both of her UFC losses have been by ground and pound TKOs by Barber and Hill. So I'm going to take Dern by a TKO. If she does get it in a compromising position on the ground though, Dern's kind of most comfortable path to victory would be via the submission. But currently Verdict have her to win by TKO at 17.9 times, so that's juicy odds, and I'll take those. Also, all of Cyphers' finish losses have come in the second round, so I'll be laying that as my prediction on Verdict. So Dern by a second round TKO. Then we go to the second fight of the main card. We got Roosevelt Roberts at 2.02 times versus Brock Weaver at 1.98 times. Roberts is 9-1, 3-1 in the UFC, and 4-1 in his last 5. Brock Weaver's 15-4, 1-0 in the UFC, being a DQ win against Kazula Vargas in his last, and 5-0 in his last 5 fights. Pretty much I think this is a bit of a step down in comp for Roosevelt. His last 2 fights were against Yakovlev and Pichel, and although he did lose to Pichel, Vince had only lost to Gregor Gillespie in the last 8 years. So he's up there. He's been fighting good guys in terms of competition. I also think that Brock was definitely losing his last fight before getting KO'd by the illegal knee and getting the win there, so something to consider in terms of a kind of tainted record. Pretty much I think if Robert comes out here and pressures Weaver, he's going to win this quite comfortably. From what I saw, Brock looks pretty average backing up. The problem there is Roosevelt does have a tendency to come out slowly and fight for points, which could be a problem, could allow Brock to get into a firefight. But if Roosevelt comes out motivated, ready to win, he should take this no dramas. He's got a really slick ground game as well. He passed Yakovlev's guard 3 times, and he's sliding through Gifford. Got through him about 6 times, I think. Got past his guard. Another thing I didn't like out of what I saw from Brock Weaver was he's far too comfortable just on his back. He was throwing up submissions against Vargas, but he didn't really threaten with them. He used them to move around a bit, but then ended up just going back to his back anyway. And with how slick Roosevelt is on the ground, if he decides to stay on his back, I think Roosevelt will definitely get a finish. Another thing to consider is Brock's amateur record. He was 9-7, so it's not so good. He is 15-4 as a pro. He does have plenty of experience, but I thought that was just something to note, that as an amateur, it's almost going at 50% there. Essentially my Verdict tip's going to be Roberts to get the submission. I do feel like he's most likely to win a decision, which is paying a 3.44 times multiplier, but the sub's currently at 17.03 times, and with 4 of his 9 wins being via submission, I think that is way too high. One of his go-to chokes is the standing guillotine because he is such a tall lightweight, which could be on if Brock lets him push him back to the cage and control him, but Brock's also 6 foot as well, so might be hard for Roosevelt to finish in that position. In terms of round, I'll be taking Roosevelt in the first round. 5 of his 7 victories by finish have been in the first, and also going back even further in his amateur record, 4 of his 6 amateur wins were all in the first round as well. So if he comes out and starts hot, I fancy his chances to wrap this one up pretty quickly. Then to the co-main, we have to skip Holland versus Rodriguez. Unfortunately, Holland pulled out due to injury this morning. There could be a fill-in fight there for Rodriguez, but we'll have to wait and see with that one. So the co-mains, Ivanov at 1.31 times versus Sakai at 4.25 times. Ivanov's 18-3, 2-2 in the UFC, and 3-2 in his last 5. And Sakai's 14-1, 3-0 in the UFC, and 5-0 in his last 5. I think just looking at these two guys on paper and kind of looking at some of their footage, Sakai's going to be the bigger guy. Ivanov's heavy, but Sakai is going to look like the larger man in there. But I don't think it will play too much of a factor. Ivanov, all 21 of his pro fights have been at heavyweight, and he's fought some big guys. I don't think it's going to play into this one too much. Sakai, starting off with him, he obviously packs plenty of power with 11 of his 14 wins coming via KO, but I would be super surprised if he finishes Blanco. He's never been KO'd, and he really does have one of the best chins in the division and in the sport. Like, you just have to look at some of the shots he took from Derry Lewis to know that he can handle it. He can handle kicks as well. I do think Sakai is going to have the advantage on the feet, down to the fact that he throws more kicks, but they are both counter punches, so it could be a bit of an uneventful affair until someone gets rocked. I don't know. The ground game though is where it kind of gets interesting. Haven't really seen Sakai on the ground before, although he did kind of pound on Sherman a little bit on the ground when he was in control. But it would seem that Ivanov had the advantage there. His 62% takedown accuracy, it's really high, it's really good. And although Sakai has good defense, I think Blanco can get him down in an exchange. 6 of his 18 wins are by submission, so it could get a little dicey down there for Sakai. But from what I've seen, Blanco doesn't really use the ground to mount offense too much, even strikes or subs. I think he goes at 0.2 submission attempts per 15. So he kind of gets it to the ground and uses it for control rather than actual offense. In terms of that though, I know he can do it. He's fought 5 rounds a couple of times, including the JDS fight. So output and grappling for that long, over a 3-round fight, I think he can keep it up, which also plays into the factor of him getting the win here. And then just something I thought I'd raise about Sakai is he did win his second fight in the UFC by a decision against Arlovsky, but he was outlanded in every round that fight. I did score that fight for Arlovsky. He ended up being at a 33 significant strike deficit at the end of the fight. And I don't want to take too much away from Sakai, but it does just take a little bit of shine off of his kind of UFC run so far. Sakai obviously never been finished, so I'm going to take Ivanov by decision. Sakai's one career loss was by points, and I'm just thinking that Blagoy's ground game and kind of versatility there, and his output via his cardio, I think can take away from the power of Sakai on the feet. And the only kind of downside of this is the verdict odds. Blanco is only at 2.02 times for the decision win, but I'm going to stick with it. If you're chasing XP, I wouldn't discredit anybody putting it on Sakai at 7.9 times for a decision win, or just to go all out at 10.3 times for the KO. I think it's very unlikely that Blanco gets put out, but like I said, go for it if you're up for it. And then to the main event, we've got Ty and Woodley at 1.42 times versus Gilbert Burns at 3.4 times. Woodley is 19-4-1, 17-4-1 in the UFC, and 3-1-1 in his last 5 fights. Gilbert Burns is 18-3, 11-3 in the UFC, and 5-0 in his last 5 fights. So yeah, on paper, like you can see, they got similar records, but there's no doubt that Woodley has a massive experience advantage in this fight, and I just can't see it not playing a factor. Woodley's no stranger to the big stage, although this is an empty arena. He's headlined 4 cards before, and also just that experience defending the actual welterweight belt 4 times. He defended 4 times, but obviously only 3 of those times successful, losing to Usman in his last. And yeah, in comparison, this is Burns' first time fighting a main event in the UFC, and he's never had that 4th or 5th round experience. He's only ever been to the 3rd round, whereas Woodley's fought the 5 round maximum 4 times. And aside from the domination Usman put on him, he's shown that he can keep up the output for 25 minutes, although he's kind of, the knock on him is he's a little bit slow. On the feet, Dern definitely has a big advantage. Burns has been improving, but speed, power, accuracy all go to Woodley. He's just kind of not on the same level. The ground game, though, Burns would seem to have more dangerous jiu-jitsu, but I think Woodley's capable of defending most of the submission attacks that Gilbert can throw up. I was watching some footage recently on Burns again. He's super slick on the ground. But the also aspect to that conversation is whether it goes to the ground at all. You'd think that Burns would be the one to initiate the grappling if it happens, but Tyron's such a good wrestler. He's got 92% takedown defense, which is 3rd highest in the UFC, and I really just don't think Burns will be able to get it down. Listen to some interviews through the week. Woodley seems really motivated. I think that Usman fight, he's had a long enough layoff to get his head right. Of course, Burns is going to be hungry as well, and he's also going to be motivated. But I'm just kind of confident in Woodley here. I don't think that Burns is going to be able to find the finish, and if this goes to a points fight, I'm all over Woodley. I think the output and just the ability to defend what Burns might throw at him will be too much. Another little factor I'd like to make is Burns' last win. I don't want to discredit him for the Damien fight, but that short left hook that dropped Meyer, a shot like that isn't going to drop Dern. You know, he's too powerful, too strong. I don't think a shot like that will put him out. Not to say that Burns couldn't drop him with a different shot, but yeah, I'm going to pick Woodley by decision. It makes heaps of sense in my head. Burns has proven durable as well. His only TKO loss is to Dan Hooker, who's a completely different type of striker than Woodley and much longer. Not to mention it was at lightweight, so completely different ball game. So yeah, verdicts have a pretty good price on the outcome. 4.53 times for Dern by decision, so I'll be backing that. Yeah, so to recap, my verdict tips: I've taken Dern by 2nd round TKO, Roberts by 1st round submission, Ivanov by decision, and Woodley by decision. Something I also just wanted to throw in at the end of the video here was a little multi per annum. With all the research that I've put in, I thought why not have a little real wager on the fights rather than just the verdict wagers. I was thinking the UFC have roughly around 40 events per year, so I've formulated a multi kind of based off my verdict picks to be priced at around $40 to 1, meaning that if I hit one a year, I break even or slightly profit, hence the name. So due to the cancelled bout between Holland and Rodriguez, I've had to dive into the prelims for some value to get the multi up to scratch, and I've chosen Chookagian. I think she's at really good odds here. I think the odds should actually be flipped. She's a points fighter, and I think she'll just do enough to outpoint Antonina across 3 rounds. I know Modafferi and Chookagian aren't really similar fighters, but Modafferi did just show that you can really get on top of Antonina, and I feel like she kind of broke in that fight. I feel like Chookagian can do the same or similar. I've also taken Dern by finish. I like the TKO odds on verdict, but I've taken the little extra coverage in case she does submit Cyphers. I've included Ivanov to win via decision. He's at really good odds. They're about pick him on the bookmakers rather than the 1.3 times or whatever he is on verdict. Backing his durability and ground game to get the decision win. And then the final leg's going to be Woodley to win via decision, which I think is at great odds. I think it's a highly likely outcome. And yeah, so just to wrap it up, thanks to everyone who listened. If you'd like to follow me on verdict to see how I'm scoring the fights live, or also to see if they fill in a fight for Daniel Rodriguez and see what I'm picking there, you can find me at It's Tadpole. And yeah, I plan on making these verdict breakdowns for most of the fight cards coming up, if not all of them. So if everything goes smoothly, I'll have another video for the main card of UFC 250 next week sometime. Cheers.